Welcome to the first episode of the Thinking CAAP. We are your hosts, Amanda Hoprich and Beck Moore of Community Action Association of Pennsylvania. And we're very excited to bring you a new resource that you can listen to on your drive, at your desk, wherever you'd like. The intention of this podcast was really to share updates with our membership about happenings here at CAP and hopefully providing a new, innovative, and informative format for the CAP team to serve our members in a new, unique way. Beck and I have both been in direct service roles, so also we know how much time you spend in cars and that you love us so much you might want to just take us with you. So here we are. Uh, And so being that this is our first episode, we just want to take a minute to talk about what you can expect today and what you can expect in future episodes of the Thinking CAAP. So we'll be launching a new episode every month. We'll be jumping into, like we said, updates from CAP. And then each episode will cover what we're calling the heart of the matter, or the huggy heart of the matter, where we'll be tackling a different and timely topic that community action is facing across PA and across the whole community. And for future episodes, what we'd love is to have questions from the community. And so if you are interested in posing questions to the CAP team to be addressed on future episodes of the Thinking CAAP, email us, at info@thecap.org, subject line Thinking CAAP, and tune in to future episodes, hopefully, that we will be able to get your questions answered. So let's jump right into it. Let's jump into our first Thinking CAAP update. And we just want to take some time to introduce ourselves so you learn a little bit more about us if you don't know us already, and talk a little bit about CAP. So I'm going to turn it over to our CEO, Beck Moore, and talk a little bit more about yourself in the CAP.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you're out there listening to us. My name's Beck. I am the CEO here, Community Action Association of Pennsylvania, or CAAP, as many of you refer to us. And ultimately, right, we are here as your membership organization to support you through professional development or training and technical assistance, as we refer to it, but really comes down to professional development opportunities. Want to make sure that if you have a need, you let us know. And at the same time, we're out there advocating for you, talking about the great work you're doing as local agencies, and making sure to try to empower you all to be able to do more good than what you're already out there doing. We appreciate the work you do.
I think that was like the perfect in a nutshell, but you did knock out a couple of my follow-up questions, which is also great, which I find he usually does. So also what makes him a great boss. But so can you talk a little bit about how long you've been doing community action, just to put in perspective, for we know that there's some long lifers in community action. So sometimes our tenure has to be worn, our novice badges, I feel like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Although I have had some people say to me that I'm no longer able to say that I'm new, which I feel that some days. So I've been here as the CEO for a little over 2 years and have been at what I describe at the bottom of a very steep climbing mountain, learning mountain. I don't come from a world of human services. I did do some direct client work long ago at the beginning of my career. I won't say how long ago that was. Google, you'll be able to find out. But yeah, I don't come from a world of human services. I don't come from a world of federal funding. And so very early on had to take a lot of time and have continued to take a lot of time to understand the work that happens on a local level, ask a lot of questions, right? Try to get to an understanding that I can be effective, and being out there and advocating on behalf of the network and being able to find the right solutions for you all to do the work that you do.
Yes, and I joined CAP shortly after Beck, about a few months after. So I would 100% agree. It has been a steep curve, which I think has made it the most exciting opportunity I've been a part of.
Yeah, I definitely feel challenged for the first time in a long time in my career, thinking a little bit differently and putting together different solutions than I have in a really long time, which makes it exciting. And being able to say that we help people, that are helping people, right? It makes it all worthwhile. And I always say, right, you all do the hard work every single day. We just get to help you.
Yeah, 100%. So the other reason why I ask to just frame how long you've been here is for the next question, because this could be a varying answer. But what's a common myth that you are debunking in community action at the association level?
With other stakeholders outside of community action?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that people just don't know about us. They just don't know who we are and what we do.
Hmm.
And I think once I start to describe the range of solutions that our agencies offer and how they really wrap services around, whole family or an individual so that gaps aren't created, it's one of the things that distinguishes us the most compared to other nonprofits out there, right? Not because they're intentionally doing this, but other nonprofits, they're there with a singular purpose, right? A singular mission around this one thing often, not always, but often. And for us, right, we're thinking about the gaps and creating solutions for the gaps so that somebody can be successful. And then also partnering with some of those other agencies that do things really well additionally, where our agencies maybe don't or don't have capacity. And so I don't think it's necessarily as much of a myth as it is just a day-to-day awareness. I think where the myths come in is when you describe what poverty really looks like to somebody in a localized community, right? And you describe what it looks like truly from a household income perspective, 7 miles away from where they're sitting in their office every day or where they're living. That's where really truly, right, people's eyes are opened up and they're like, I didn't realize that poverty looks like this, because the way that they think about someone who's living in poverty or somebody who's homeless is very different than the realities of what exists today.
Yeah. Which I think, and I'm glad that you mentioned at the community level, because one of the things that I think we're also consistently informing some outside stakeholders is that community action programming is based on the community needs assessments that are conducted. And that is one of the things that makes you a community action agency. And especially when we're in conversations with healthcare entities who are trying to replicate how to even conduct those types of assessments where we're already doing them.
Yeah, I think when you think about the stakeholders that we talk to on a day-to-day basis, that's, thinking from a myth busting perspective, when we talk to healthcare and some other folks, they don't often think that we are as innovative as what we are. Our ability to really stretch and be thoughtful about the right technology to do the work that we do, right? Like, our agencies are some of the most innovative nonprofits that I have ever had the fortune of meeting and talking to. Um, and I think, for those of you who are listening, that's the one thing I can't stress enough is talk about the work that you are doing, right? And if you are
Yes.
not an agency that has community action in your name, make sure that you refer to yourself as the community action agency, right, in this particular community, because that's the one thing that unifies us. And part of where we get traction from an advocacy perspective is making sure that we are sharing some of those bullet points, right, collectively across the state so that we are thought of when someone is trying to find a statewide solution. They come to us first,
Yep.
right? To help then create those solutions, because we're more often than not, we're already doing the work.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. And I would echo that. And if you need support talking about yourself, that's why we're here. Our ever
Yeah.
growing team, we have new marketing. We'll give a shout out to our newest staff member, Catherine, who will be editing and marketing all of this. So she'll get to hear it firsthand. But we would love to support our member agencies. If you're not sure where to start, just, call us, email us,
Yeah.
and lift up on a network call, get on a cohort call, so that we can help support you and help create those plans and goals. That's really our role here.
Yeah.
Um, so then let me ask you, what's your favorite thing about the work we do at the association level? What brings you the most joy that's a little bit different from the agency level?
Yeah. I think being able to offer a solution or just oftentimes a listening ear of support. We have, right, a range of experience across the network in terms of executive leadership, frontline staff, middle managers, and where I have always really loved doing the work that I do, both at CAP and in operations in general over the years, is I'm a fixer, right? I like fixing problems. And so if I can create a fix or offer a listening ear and someone feels supported in that moment and gives them some relief from a situation that they're dealing with, whether it's a relationship issue or a client issue or a funding issue or whatever it is, or an issue with, another teammate, or trying to find a solution for a DEI challenge or whatever it is. And when I get an email, right, that says like, hey, I really just appreciate you listening for 20 minutes. I needed
Mm.
to hear your voice today. Like my heart, first of all, you know, I feel really blessed that somebody would feel that way, but it tugs at my heartstrings, because I think the challenge for us is we're not in the day to day, right? We're not out helping clients. And so
Mhm.
they're effectually our agencies, their staff, you all, right, that are listening to this, hopefully you are our clients. And so when we offer you a support that helps you to do something and it makes your day a little bit less crazy or less hard, that helps me feel good. And I think the fact that we're able to stand up and speak on behalf of communities and individuals who have been sort of, right, I don't even like to say marginalized, those who have been pushed to the margins, right? We get to advocate for those folks and be able to stand for our collective voice. I love also being able to do that as somebody who does have lived experience, as somebody who was homeless, right? Somebody who lived in poverty for a long time. That's part of why I work here every day. I don't want to go back to direct service, if I'm being completely honest. It's a hard job you all have. So the fact that I get to help you, that's fantastic. And, you know, gives me all the good feels.
Well, I mean, I don't want to cry on our first episode, but what I am gonna do, because I feel like that was the perfect segue into, I'm gonna skip a few of my next questions because that is the perfect segue into our huggy heart of the matter. Because today's huggy heart of the matter is talking about workplace culture through a DEI lens. And Beck, I know we're going to talk about this, a personal passion point for you. And along with something in my opinion, having you spoke in many different contexts about this, I think you put a really great perspective on. And my hope is some of our listeners may have also heard you in the past. And for those listeners, hopefully, if you have some feedback or questions about today's huggy heart of the matter, please consider sending it over to us by emailing us at info@thecaap.org. So what I'd like to do is start here. And I'm like to keep Beck on his toes so he has not heard any of these questions. But if you can begin with how your approach to this work you feel is most different before we jump into the heart of it, the
To
huggy heart of it.
the huggy heart of the matter, yeah. So with respect to workplace culture in particular.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think when I'm engaging conversations about DEI, right, people tend to want to jump into these really big issues and challenges and problems. And I want to make sure to say this on up front. I don't want to devalue or not give enough, credit for the need to have those deep conversations. But basic DEI work, basic, right, understanding of who we are as humans and feeling seen, heard, appreciated, and valued every day in the workplace doesn't have to be so complicated. And so where I speak about this topic is just making sure that there's really simplistic infrastructure and thoughtfulness in place so that somebody can show up to work. And if they're having a hard day, we give them the emotional space and opportunity to just say, like, look, I had a hard morning this morning. My kids were a total, pain in the butt, and they wouldn't put their shoes on, and it took me forever to get out the door. And by the time I already got in my car, I felt like I'd already, had 2 anxiety attacks because of whatever was going on. Like that's real. That's who we are.
Right. That's
That's
where
what
we've all
happens.
been.
Right. Like I feel that all day long, right? Like just put your shoes on. And so when we give people that type of emotional space, that's not always easily achieved, right? Because for so long in the workplace, and when you and I started in workforce, Amanda, it was HR had a different perspective, right? Like you came to work, you did your job, you went home, you weren't allowed to talk about certain things, you didn't have certain things on your desk. That's just the way it was. And today, that there's a shift being made, but you have to be intentional about making sure managers are ready to support that type of discussion. You have to make sure that you have, um, thoughtfulness built into just giving people space in a one-on-one to just kind of like check in about how they are. And it doesn't mean, described this recently in another conversation I was having, doesn't mean I'm going to invite, my entire team over to my birthday party. First of all, because I don't want to make them come to my house on a Saturday with my children, but also,
No one wants to be at
no.
anyone's house with their own children on a Saturday, but
Right. Right. But what it means is making sure that we're connected as humans. I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day, right? Like, so think about it in simplistic ways. Think about it from the perspective of when people start your organizations, what's the first impression that they have? Do they know what to expect the day before or even a couple days before? Because new jobs are anxiety driving.
hmm
Before we
you
have,
have taught me the most important thing about onboarding a staff member is to make sure they know how to get in the building and they know what they're going to eat for lunch. And those two things, if you can remember nothing else, those two things are very important because we've lived it. How many staff,
right,
or in our own experiences, were we locked out of the building day one or didn't know how to pack a lunch, where, how to appropriately have, you have no idea what to
where to
expect.
where to park,
Correct. Right. How to get there
right?
because the GPS address is wrong. That happened in my first job when Beck hired me. But
Look, to be clear, I've not always been the
HR
best.
called me and said you have to put in this other wrong address to get there. So they covered me. That's
But right, like we forget, and the further and further that we get away from our first experiences or our hardest
hmm
experiences, we forget about those things. And
Yep.
we have to teach and make sure that our managers and our supervisors of our teams understand, right? Basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like care and comfort matter. Do
hmm
I know where I'm going to put my lunch? Do I know where I'm going to sit? Am I going to have access to fresh water if I want to fill my water bottle? Is there a coffee machine? Do I need to bring a coffee mug? What are the cultural norms when I walk through the door? You know, every place is a little bit different in terms of what has been said. And so we have to think about how do we help to celebrate people? How do we help to show up when somebody has a person in their life that passes away or somebody's sick or a pet dies? Like that may not seem like much, but depending on what your family structure is or who you are, your lived identity, those are the things that really matter to somebody. And when you help someone feel supported or celebrated or right, just give them capacity to vent for a minute, that does something for somebody, right? That helps somebody feel like a real human,
And you never know when, varying on the day, if you're the only person that can make them feel that way
right?
or a way they didn't even know they need to feel to be seen, recognized, heard like that, you know.
Right. I think one of the things that I talk about from a privilege perspective as supervisors, as people that have power, whether you're a teacher or you work in a faith-based community and you have a position of power or whatever it is, you have a certain amount of privilege that you have to remember that you have. And there are times that, I mean, Amanda, I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of this at some point in our tenure together. We're not always the best versions of ourselves, right? But we forget what it's like to be on the receiving end when we just snap off about something, right? Because we've had a bad day. And so we have to figure out a way to give ourselves some grace and make sure that we're able to also show up and on our best and brightest ways so we can support people. Because when we react negatively and it's for no cause, right, that also does something to somebody. And so we have to think about what's the balance of how to be supportive and there for people and listening, but also, right, making sure that we've checked our own selves,
Yep.
right, in order to be able to be the most supportive. So I think, from a workplace culture perspective, again, you go back to your question, I think it's both really simplistic, but also intentionality of simplicityness, whatever the word is, I don't know. Um, to be able to do those things well. And when you do start to do them well, you see a lot of really amazing traction, right, of what you can create. And you see people starting to show up differently.
Yep.
You see people being more willing to show up in
letting their
the
guard
hard
down
moments, right? Letting
to,
their guard
yes.
down. Yeah. And I think you end up seeing more success at the end of the day. It's a pretty powerful thing. And when you can start to define it, right, and you can help people to understand what it means to show up in similar ways, it's even better. But from a starting block, you gotta have a conversation, right? Like, does every employee that starts in your organization, and for those of you listening, our frontline team members, right? What was your first day like?
Hmm.
Did you know those things? And if you didn't, there's an opportunity there for you to have a conversation with your supervisor if you feel comfortable enough to do that. To say like, hey, I just want to give you some perspective. Listen to this podcast, the Thinking CAAP, and had some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. If you don't have that space and you want us to be your voice, then we're happy to do that too. Try to protect names and innocence, but I think it's an important thing to start that conversation.
Yeah. No, and I'm going to circle back around to something which I will also apologize because I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of me having a bad day as well over the years. And that sometimes, and to kind of flip the coin on the other side, sometimes even those days help us grow as to recognize when we're not being our best version of ourselves. And sometimes those moments of humbling when we can recognize and check that privilege even after we may have not been the best version of ourselves, to come back and be humble about it, comes back to that ability then for the you're building team ego, which I want to talk about your thoughts on ego in a moment. Because
Well,
we all have lots of thoughts on ego, but team ego and that team bond, should we say, also just helps to drive that success when people have that ability to show up in the workplace.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, you hit the nail on the head there. If you're a parent, you've probably heard about reparative parenting, right? And when we fly off the handle, and I know that, you know, God help me
We
if my
all have moments we're not
right,
proud
like
of.
God help me if my parents are listening right now. But my parents, reparative parenting in the 80s was not a thing.
Right.
Today, right, we know that those moments matter more and our kids remember, and it helps to showcase, right, the healthy relationship pieces of when we do something that we didn't intend to do and we hurt somebody's feelings as a result, we have to go back and say we're sorry. And I think as managers and as humans, we have to make sure to recognize those moments. And so it's no different than reparative parenting in my mind, right? We have to be reparative in our relationships at work. So if I have a crappy day and I say something or I'm not right my best and highest self, I make sure to show up authentically and go back and try to be thoughtful about like, look, man, I'm sorry, I or whoever, right? I
Yeah.
just was having a bad day. I need to let you know what's going on in my life.
And those moments
But
are even, I have found, on both sides, end up being moments of growth
yeah,
with the team, often coming from a mistake. And
yeah.
uh it
And
just
I
means a
know
lot.
and I know not every leader feels comfortable being able to share, and everybody's got their own lived experience and own trauma that they're trying to, do I let somebody in? Do I not let somebody in? And for a long time, I was somebody who just never shared what was going on in my personal life. And when I had some personal things that happened a few years ago, I had a supervisor who really encouraged me to just share what was going on because they knew that I was going to be out for an extended period of time. And she knew that there would be love and support for what was going on and wanted me to feel that because in other instances, she knew that I didn't have it. And so I've tried to really own that as I've grown as a leader. And when I'm ready, right, I share the hard things that are going on. I mean, I have a son with special needs, right? There's some days are just really hard. Not everybody knows about all the ins and outs of it, but if you ask people generally today that know me at all, they're going to say, yeah, I know Beck has a son and I know he's got special needs because I try to be authentic about it.
I think you're being a little humble about one other thing that I want to touch on about your approach in this work, and in, we'll talk even in formal workshops, which are available to CAP members. Don't forget, one free with your membership every year. But is the applicable tools that I know having that have been very effective that you have taught me to utilize. One is just the simple, which is available as a download on our website, the staff favorite things list.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about this, is such a very small easy thing to do when you're bringing in new staff. And to your point earlier, we have to prepare and train managers for
Yep.
how to do this. And this one simple exercise, or having this one resource created by your management director staff, I think has been invaluable in my experience. Can you talk a little about it?
Sure, absolutely. So when we think about our lives, or we think about them in transitions, when you describe your life right now, like I was born here, I went to school here, I went to high school here, I graduated from here, I had this job, got married, I had a child, whatever your transitions have been.
Started a podcast called The
Right,
Thinking CAAP.
right, which I'm hoping to get a hat.
Day one, here we go. New chapter of our lives.
Yeah, never did I think. And so those moments deserve attention, right? Because they matter to us. They're the moments we remember the most, if they're good or bad, right? If somebody passes, but those are the moments we remember, those big life transitions. And so we have to make sure to give those the power that they deserve. And so what Amanda's referring to is our favorites list, which is ultimately simple things in somebody's life: favorite candy, favorite snacks, favorite hobby, favorite place to shop, what's your coffee order? If you don't drink coffee, what's your favorite drink, right? Your favorite local restaurant, so that when we have those moments, right, we want to honor and say to somebody, hey, I know you're having a bad day, or you're going into maybe a long day and you know somebody's had a hard week or whatever it is, you can make sure to bring them their coffee order, right? I say this all the time, if you're a Starbucks drinker or a Dunkin' drinker and somebody brings you Dunkin' in your Starbucks, you're like, oh, you don't know me. Thanks for the coffee, but I'm not drinking that swill. And if I'm a Dunkin' drinker, right, same thing goes. Like, don't bring me Starbucks. I don't understand your coffee order. Just bring me my, whatever it is.
Very controversial, folks.
It is. I
Mhm.
do a whole podcast on that, and I'm sure there probably is already. But ultimately, right, like that helps somebody feel like, oh, Beck remembered my coffee order.
100%. And you doing that and then being, giving that actual resource, that piece of paper that we put in our onboarding packets now. But
Right.
even before that, anytime at my first one-on-one with a staff member, even if they weren't a direct, is to kind of gather that information. And one thing that I love that we kind of took it to the next version at CAP, if everyone feels comfortable, is we have that available for all of our staff to
Yep.
see all of our other staff's favorites. So we're a small staff. So it's, but anytime staff member's birthday, I know exactly, based on my budget of I can send them a candy bar through Amazon. I can send them their favorite candy bar through Amazon though. So
Right.
even though my budget is $5 for each of my staff members as a manager, or, we were making the most with the resources we have, it kind of gives you these tools. Or to, one of the things that I think one of the moments, and we won't talk about the person that it was, but in Beck putting this to action, that kind of made me make this ingrained in part of what I do, was a staff member had a passing in their family. And, you're able to look up what the local restaurant is that delivers in their area and know, at least if you can get them a pizza,
Right.
that at least dinner is taken care of. And I've seen Beck do that in several occasions, that, uh, it's a small, effective tool and resource, and helps train your managers and directors. Here's the tool or resource,
Yep.
and sort of live by this.
And it's one of those things. I mean, look, I am not, Amanda gives me far too much credit. You do. I think there are times that I try to be really thoughtful and intentional about those things, but I'm not like, you know, I, I still have my moments where I forget, because that's not something that was ever ingrained in me in the beginning of my career. And so I've had to remind myself. It's why, right, I have every single team member's birthdays on my calendar, because if it's not there, I'm not going to remember. I barely know my own birthday. I barely know
Gotta
my
do it too.
birthday. Like
Yeah.
that's got to be what happens. And so I think as a manager, if you're listening to this, I think I had a supervisor years ago that we shared an executive assistant. And I know not everybody is privileged enough to have an executive assistant, so I respect this, but whatever the infrastructure is, right? And I remember in interviewing this for our executive assistant position, she said, we need you to make us look more thoughtful as people. And I was like, yes, that's true. How does that happen? Because I am so overwhelmed with the day to day. I'm not going to remember to honor, right, your 1 year anniversary as to the organization. So our executive assistant would make sure to buy us cards, right? Fill in some information. We would both sign our names and she would mail them out to the team.
It's building the system that works because on any one given day you only have so much capacity, and
Right,
especially,
absolutely.
it's, but if it's getting done, and that's where those, and how to train our managers and directors to make that, if you're not good at this, find whoever on your team is good at
Right. Yes.
this.
Have a team effort in those things. Like we're gonna celebrate collectively our wins, whatever it is. If you have to be thoughtful, right? Does everybody celebrate their birthday? Is that, does that triggering for whatever reason? There are other caveats to all of that, but ultimately, I think you've got to build that team framework to have the celebration pieces. And once you do, right, again, it goes back to what we've already said, the culture that creates, um, it's a place where people want to work, right? It's a place where people want to show up and be their best selves. And by the way, probably want to refer the organization to other people that they want also to come and work there. And so this is the other underscoring of all of this is when we talk about DEI here, we talk about it from a workplace culture perspective because that's what helps to also solve for retention and recruitment issues and churn, right? And so if you find yourself constantly in the situation where you're recruiting, hiring, not always, but I would argue that you need to think about a bit of establishing clear workplace cultures and values and how those live every single day. And yes, staff favorites is a really simplistic way to start to drive that and embed it in all layers of your organization.
And it creates the system for more effective communication
Right.
and more effective, along with, I mean, we could do a whole nother episode on how it affects retention and the data behind the effects in retention that workplace culture has.
And I would be curious to know if you're listening and you have something that either you do as a manager that's really phenomenal that people have appreciated, or you have a manager that's doing something for you really phenomenally. Whatever that thing is, would love to know so that we can help to promote it out, right? Give a shout out to them
Yes.
on social media, or showcase them in an upcoming podcast or a DEI presentation of some kind,
Yeah.
and help also, provide some
Give
solutions.
another tool, right? Another tool
Right.
for all our toolboxes,
Yes, absolutely.
100%. So before we round out our huggy heart of the matter, the last thing that I just want to kind of put for all of our organizations that are, whether organizational leaders or wherever they are in the organization is, as an individual, what would be the one place you would say this is the first thing you should start with in looking at yourself to be that change in workplace culture?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Totally unscripted, folks. I wanted to surprise him because I know how much he loves it.
I hate being scripted. Not as not as thoughtful. Um, no, it's a hard thing to think about. I mean,
And it could depend on the day, right?
yeah,
So I found this question as a sample question and I couldn't answer it. So I didn't throw it. 'Cause I really think it depends on the day. It depends on the season of your organization, right? Like right now, we're ramping up. I keep saying like it's that stress is temporary and will be relieved. Or, where are you teetering on that burnout phase? Or, how do you like, it depends, right? But
yeah.
how do you start that in your experience?
I think, you know, all of us have the rock star folks at the agencies where we work that they really epitomize what and how we want the rest of the team to show up. Maybe that's you, maybe it's somebody that works on your team, but I think starting to capture what it is about that person, the essence of that person that makes you feel that way, helps you to then be able to describe what if you had an army or a whole group of those people. But let's call this person Sally. What if we had a whole group of Sallys that were just really amazing?
Yes. Yes.
That's what we want.
Yep.
right? So how do we start to describe who Sally is and why she's such a rock star every day?
Yeah. And I literally, as you were talking, I saw this flash of us going through this exercise
Yeah.
with the past staff and naming,
Mhm.
here are our core values, who embodies this. And let's all be, communication, who's the best? Sally's the best. Let's all be Sally's at communication. Why do you
Right.
think Sally is the best?
Right.
And that is how you start helping to define those pieces. That is an excellent start. Oh my gosh. Well, now we're gonna mic drop on Huggy Heart of the moment. No, we'll close it out before we go to the lack of questions from the community this time. But we'll kind of jump into those pieces too. So, uh, just rounding this out, and appreciate all of your comments, Beck. What would you like to leave our newly found listeners of the Thinking Cap with on workplace culture?
And so one of the things that I talk about often in presentations that I do about workplace culture is that everyone, right, influences workplace culture. It's what we say, what we do, it's what we don't do, it's how we show up or don't show up as allies, whether you're a manager, frontline staff, you're whatever it is that you do, you influence that day to day, and how you show up influences that workplace culture. And whether it's on paper or not, right, workplace culture is established.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just ask all of you to think, right, about how you either aid to creating a great workplace culture where people can thrive and feel appreciated, or do you take away from that culture? And that's a hard thing to look inwardly and reflect on. And all of us, right, can change our behaviors and think about what's the one thing that we can do to help influence that. And if you're somebody sitting in an agency and isn't satisfied with workplace culture, you have to remember that it's not just what everybody else around you does,
Yep.
right? We've had this conversation
Oh,
many times,
love that. Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's also we have ownership in that, right? We
Yep.
influence our surroundings. Not completely, but we have ownership in that. And so how can we help to try to create a workplace culture where everybody wants to live and thrive and come to work every day, so that come
Yes.
Sunday, we're not like, oh God, I've got to go back to that place.
Yes, which I mean, I think I can say this pretty openly. I mean, I found that at CAP, probably the first I ever,
Yeah.
and and continue to find that at continue to find that at CAP. Oh, this was so great. And if you are a member agency listening and you want to jump into this more with your team or have a workplace values workshop with CAP staff and help actually going through the exercise of defining your workplace values and how to support them and next steps, we would love to have a CAP staff member come and do that for y'all. So if you're interested, just reach out to us. And like I said earlier, I think we're really trying to make sure our members know you get one free workshop or opportunity with CAP staff as part of your membership in the year. So take advantage of that.
And I'll just close by saying, please don't forget that if you have a question about a hard conversation you're having or something that you're dealing with respect to this, please email us at info@thecap.org, right? We want to make sure to help lift up those challenges. And it's not always going to be us talking about these things. We're going to have some guests come on and talk about them as well.
Yes, we have some
But
guests coming up for handling emotional situations in the workplace.
yeah, absolutely. So we want to help to create some of those solutions. So please email us, let us know your thoughts, help us to help you.
Yes. And for any of the events or opportunities that we have mentioned, you can find all of this information at thecap.org. That's two A's. Um, Along with our full calendar of events, we have cohort calls and expert webinar opportunities pretty much scheduled throughout the year. I think we just added one for December today to the calendar. So we have lots of opportunities coming up. So now to switch gears to what will eventually be questions from the community, because all you folks are going to be sending us some really great questions to start putting our thinking caps on. But so being this is our first episode and we don't have any of those formal questions yet, we're gonna kind of just keep rolling here. If you'd like to send us those, email us at info@thecap.org. But Beck, why don't you tackle what are some of the most frequent questions you are asked, either about work community action on a whole, kind of we'll summarize in community action on a whole, digging into workplace culture or DEI altogether. What are some of the most common questions either from our agencies or in the community that you find you're receiving often?
Yeah. So number one, what is community action? I've never heard of it.
Yes. So again, you all need to talk about yourselves more and more and more and more. So
Right. So what do you do? I don't understand. It's like before I started here, I didn't know either. So
Yeah.
it's, as somebody who had to learn themselves, I appreciate that question because I didn't know.
And we'll
Uh,
keep talking about y'all
yeah,
more and more and more and as often as we possibly can.
absolutely. Yes, please. And then I think often the question that I get the most about kind of DEI workplace culture is how do we start to do DEI work in a way that is not politicized, in a way that people aren't going to react to,
Yep.
right?
And this is becoming way more frequent.
Yeah, and I think that what we've talked about today, right, in terms of our approach with workplace culture is a non-negotiating point because one of the biggest issues that from the very moment that I got here was we have a recruitment and retention issue.
Yep.
Almost every single executive director that I talk to, because the work is hard, right? I get
Yep.
that it's
Frequent burnout. Right.
like if you're somebody who has trauma in your life and you work in one of our agencies, right, you're helping other people overcome their trauma. All of this that starts to push on so many things, and the burnout is real. And so, how do we support and help people feel seen, heard, appreciated, and valued in that work so that they have the space, right, to be able to do it, the ability to kind of go back, right, and reset and have some space before they have to deal with the next thing. That's all a part of workplace culture and values. And that all is a part of what then leans into recruitment and retention. So I think that was one of the biggest things from the moment that I got here that people asked about. And then as we've leaned into more DEI work, then the question becomes, well, how do I depoliticize it? But the answer is one and the same, right? It's all
Right.
workplace culture and values work.
Right.
You're gonna
Even the
give me
most curmudgeony board member, whomever, county stakeholder, whomever
right.
is not going to say, yeah, you should definitely treat your staff like crap.
Right.
You
Ah,
should definitely treat, that's a non-negotiable. This is a politicized,
right.
that's,
Right.
and that's what that's, I think, yeah, it's
Yes.
as simple as that.
And everybody wants, I don't think anybody's going to argue at the end of the day, I don't want to feel successful at work. Nobody's gonna, nope.
Correct.
Everybody wants to feel successful in some way, shape,
Right.
form,
I
or
want to
another,
feel like
right?
a big loser,
Right.
unaccomplished,
Right.
inability to, yes, no
Right.
one's saying that.
So that's part of what workplace culture and values discussion and IE equal sign, whatever you want to put in there, that's part of DEI, it's part of workplace culture and values. It's all one and the same. Yes, there are deeper, harder conversations about racial healing and race relations in an office, and right, thinking about whether or not to use pronouns in email signatures, and right, gender uh, free bathrooms, yeah, those types of things. Those are harder conversations, but you can't have that conversation
Right.
honestly and openly unless you've had the basic conversation. So you've got to think about it from the perspective of, right, how do I start? How do I crawl before I walk? How do I roll over
And
before
implement.
I can crawl, before I can walk, and implement at the same time, right? And you can have these aspirational big goals, but you've got to start on, does how does my staff member feel after a week on the job? Are they wondering, oh God, what did I get myself into? More times
Right.
than they're feeling like, oh, this is a great place to work. Because if the answer is they say, oh God, what did I get myself into? More than they say, this is a great place to work. They're My guess is, I don't have any concrete data on it, they're probably not going to stick around. Because the turnaround from, oh God, to this is a great place to work could take a long time,
Right.
or you may never do it.
So true. So true.
Did I
I
answer your
mean,
question?
yes, yes. I mean, the question was, what are your most frequent questions? So
Yeah.
it could be any. What'd you eat for breakfast?
Well, usually the biggest question is, how you doing? Fine. How are you?
Oh, well, this sort of wraps up our first episode of the Thinking Cap app. So we appreciate anyone who decided to tune in to us and our this is it. We'll be putting our thinking caps on monthly, and we ask to submit your questions, comments, concerns, and anything you like to hear us tackle. And just know we're also going to say to, I mean, you can call out Beck if you want, maybe some particular board members or leaders in our network in PA. We may be calling upon you to be a special guest
It's true.
of the Thinking Cap.
And if I were to guess, I would probably imagine that that will come with some swag at some point that
Definitely.
CAP always tries to be really thoughtful about to appreciate all of you in helping us or participating in the work that we do. We love our CAP swag.
Yeah, and the Thinking Cap lends itself to a whole new world of cap swag that
That
we
was
are
my
excited
thoughts.
to bring to a community action agency near you.
It's true. Just saying.
Just saying.
Thank you for being a part of this episode of the Thinking CAAP. Check the show notes for resources and links to other episodes. And don't forget to subscribe and follow to be notified when new episodes are released. If you have any community action questions you'd like Beck, Amanda, or one of our local experts to answer in a future episode, please email your questions about community action to info@thecaap.org. Subject line, Thinking CAAP.